Hey guys, welcome back to Babblings. I need to get some cool music intro. That's probably not going to happen tonight because I told myself that I would be consistent, start being consistent, and just like put energy into this and do it bi-weekly. And just a lot has transpired and I haven't been able to record, and it's Wednesday. So in order to keep that promise to myself, I need to record and edit and put this out tonight. And it's 7. Hey Google, what time is it? It's 7:17 p.m. Celine, don't. She's trying to get the microphone cord. It's not a toy. Celine, no. Niet. I think she lived with Russians before. I just started saying that the other day and she like really listens and I was like, oh, whoa. Celine, don't. So yeah, it's 7:15. So I was like, Allie, we just like need to get this on the road. Anyways, I just got out of the shower. I'm in my PJs, so I am comfy cozy. I've got a hair mask in my hair and my hair braided. I've got my tequila soda. I just smoked a little. So I'm ready to go. If you guys are ready, welcome back to Babblings. I hope everyone's been having a good week. I feel like, well, not a great week. I don't know. Weird things have been happening and I've been doing a lot of reflection and I've been really exhausted. I also started my period, all the things. So, but at the same time, I am doing good. So I hope that you're doing good too. Want to put out there, feel free to check out my Substack. That is kind of the one-stop shop for all things podcast, the article newsletters that go with each podcast. It's like an episode description with all the resources and everything and extra fun stuff that I put together. And then also just different dribbles and drabbles by me on there, just putting up kind of my thoughts. I have a couple of pieces coming and I'm also trying to be really consistent about doing that. I'm really creative right now, so that's great. I'm going to keep swinging my braid. Sorry. I'm really in a creative space right now, so that's awesome. And I'm just trying to like leverage that. Like while it's here, I might as well tap into it. So yeah, definitely check out my Substack, babblings.substack.com. It's basically like my website. It'll be linked below. And also make sure to check out the episode description for the link to the specific newsletter that goes with this episode. That also has the link to the corresponding newsletter that goes with this episode, the Babblings Report number 2. So check that out. It's going to have all of the things that I reference when we get into our larger topic, which is going to be, I guess I'll just put this here, trigger warning. The title of this episode, wait, what is that episode title? The episode title, Quiet on Set, Quiet in School and in Church, the continued exploitation of children. There will be topics of child abuse of all kinds, emotional, physical, essay. We'll be getting into all of that. I say essay because it's going to go on YouTube. I don't want them to like say that I'm doing anything bad, but yeah, so trigger warning, you may want to skip past those parts, which everything is timestamped also in the episode description if you want to kind of avoid that. And it'll really be at the end, the larger section that we'll talk about at the end. But yeah, we're going to be getting into a little bit of a serious topic because we're back to our more normal format where I'm not just like babbling, but I also have something like specific to talk about that I researched. Okay. So that is all in the episode description. How many times can I say episode description? A lot of times. So anyways, let me take a drink. Cheers to you guys. It is Wednesday night. I've got a tequila soda with raspberry lemonade. So delish. ASMR. One of the things I did want to talk about, kind of current events that happened in the last 2 weeks. The Vice President of America, who's also running for president in the 2024 election, if you didn't know, Kamala Harris, she went on the Call Her Daddy podcast with Alex Cooper. And if that doesn't tell you where we are as a society, I don't know what will. No shade to Alex. God bless. You're a billionaire. You don't even care about me. Okay. But listen. Okay. Listen. I mean, she's not a great interviewer, right? Like just in general, we can give like constructive criticism there. And also, this is the podcast that 4 years ago I was listening to for blowjob tips. Like, I'm not even joking. And I really only listen to it for that. And then I'll like every once in a while she will interview someone where I'm like, ooh, I really want to hear what they like. I never really hear from them. I want to hear their personality or what they have to say, but not really because of her. I knew as soon as they started to do the brat stuff. The thing is, what they're doing, Kamala Harris's campaign, sorry, as far as marketing and trying to reach the younger generation, there are tons of kids that just turned 18 this year that will be able to vote in time for the election in November. And they want to reach them and they want to get them on their side and want them to vote. So they're really leaning into, this Gen Z pop culture TikTok phenomena. The thing is, they get me because it's a good idea, right? Like marketing wise and brand wise, it's very smart. And I understand being in that mindset to do that. But I think my mind exists so outside of like American democracy. I don't know. Like, I'm so like, to me, it's not real. Like, obviously, it's real. God, I'm going to get in trouble. Nobody's going to understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about this. Obviously, the American democracy is real, but it's not like, what am I trying to say? I don't live a life where okay, this is what I'm trying to say. I don't live a life where I like buy into Democratic or Republican propaganda. That's what I mean when I'm like, I understand, those staffers and those interns, and they're so excited. Like, they are very much like, this is everything. And yeah, it's a great idea, but it's such a sign. Oh my God, I'm going to sound like so old, but it really is just kind of shows where we're going as far as how we treat these like ultimate powerful positions in America. And it really, with Trump, started to really more widely be seen as like kind of like a joke, right? The whole thing. And he's kind of a joke. Now Kamala's being campy and leaning into the joke, and everyone's leaning into the joke, but why? It's not a joke. Like, people's lives are at stake when we're talking about policy decisions and who has influence over the greater American population. Like, and Chapel Roan has gotten in a lot of trouble recently because, also, by the way, Tana Mojo and Brooke Schofield having a take on Chapel Roan, like canceling like some shows. Babe, read the room. Read the room. That's all I have to say on that. Anyways, Chapel Roan, got in some heat because she was saying, I'm not going to endorse either candidate, blah, 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 blah. And people got so fired up. Like, first of all, yes, an election is coming, but we all have like other shit to do during the day as well. If we're all like living a real life, okay? You guys have way too much time on your hands, some of you. Talking to you. I'm talking to you. Some of you have way too much time on your hands, you little freaks. And they got so upset at Chapel. And it's because it's become so simplified that it's almost like you can't have any nuance, or you can't have a nuanced take, or you can't see things from more than one side without being like morally wrong. That's what people on TikTok want you to believe. I'm getting really off topic. Okay, I'm getting really off topic. I think I need to cut all of that out, and we need to go back to Kamala Harris on Call Her Daddy. Anyways, I just rambled, and I'm cutting all of that out. I literally just babbled for 5 minutes, went totally off topic. That's not at all what we're talking about, Allie. We need to stay focused. We have an end goal tonight, okay? And the people don't want to hear all of that shit, okay? Feel free to put this on 2 times speed, always. Always feel free to do that. I know I talk fucking slow, okay? I just thought that was silly, and it's like, wow, here we go. But like, also maybe it's a good thing, like, because I do feel that we are seeing the beginning of the end of like American democracy as we know it. And I don't know if that necessarily means what people would really love it to mean, which would mean like revolution. That could also mean like the alt-right like takes over. The states could split up into separate countries and we'd look more like Europe. I mean, like, a lot of things could happen, but I do think we're seeing the beginning of the end. I don't know if we're at the beginning of 100 years or if we're at the beginning of 50 years. Only time will tell. Maybe we're at the beginning of a 200-year like cycle in more upsetting kind of news and sadder current events. We did have Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton hit mostly in Florida off the coast, and that was like the very end of September, beginning of October. Definitely hoping everyone in Florida is doing good. There was definitely a lot of destruction there. A very crazy event, especially Milton, and I think it was just such a big, well, I wish it would have been, and I hope it is, a big wake-up call to a lot of people having such huge storms back to back. I mean, this is completely and solely because of global warming and because of climate change and the ocean temperatures rising. That's why. Look into it. The scientists told me. And I told my mom the other day, the scientists are crying on TV. Once the scientists start crying, like, guys, it's over. And you want to know something for real? The scientists were crying like 2 years ago outside of like this huge mega corporation in California. And that's when I knew. I said, oh, because everybody wants to make me feel like, not everybody, certain people make me want to feel like I'm catastrophizing, or like I'm a conspiracy theorist because of like climate change, or like it's gonna happen but not like no, like it's fucking bad, you guys. It's fucking bad. We're in bad times, and this is just the start of it. So my love goes to everyone in Florida. I know some people that were personally affected. The St. area got hit pretty hard. Fort Myers still hasn't recovered from the last time it got hit really bad. So sending my love to everyone there. But actually the place that was most impacted, in my opinion, but I'm pretty sure also like factually, the place that was hit the hardest was Asheville, North Carolina, and like this kind of surrounding Appalachian Mountains area. Western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, right there on the mountains. They got hit extremely hard from Hurricane Helene. I was watching a video, and basically, and this is a place, I looked it up, and this is all going to be in the newsletter. Also, there's going to be resources. I would really love for you guys to go watch some videos. The news and the media are not covering this like they should be. This was a huge generational defining climate disaster, what happened in Western North Carolina. The topography of the land was changed. I was watching a video, and the scientist was saying, they're going to be able to look back, archaeologists, in 1,000 years, and look back and know what happened because of the sediment in the soil, the layers. Like how we can look back on like historical events that happened 1,000 years ago and know that there was a disaster there. Like that's what happened 2 weeks ago in in Asheville, North Carolina. So basically what happened, and it's hard to conceptualize, and I think people aren't reporting on it because of fear and how awful it is. And I think it really puts into perspective what we're going to be dealing with as these kind of disasters keep coming, natural disasters keep coming, keep hitting us because of climate change. Western North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, I looked it up. It's like 300 miles from the nearest coast. 300 miles. We're all worried about Florida, and it is a very big thing to worry about. I was telling my mom, it's not just, one day we're going to lose the coast, but it's going to be like this, where storm after storm after storm keeps hitting, and people have to continually evacuate. It's going to become uninhabitable because you can barely live there because the storms are so bad and so consistent. But then for that to happen so far inland is even scarier because it shows those kinds of weather systems aren't going to just hit the coast when they come and come and come. So basically what happened up in the mountains in Asheville, they got all of the pre-hurricane rain, tons and tons of rain soaked the soil. And then when the hurricane hit and then the aftermath went over that part of North Carolina and the Appalachian Mountains, it just completely soaked through, caused mass flooding, mudslides. These are like, I watch these videos and homes like floating down rivers, streets cut in half. And this is why I really want you guys to go and watch the videos that I linked in the newsletter, because it's hard to understand without seeing it visually. It's hard to for us to conceptualize that kind of cataclysmic event happening. If you look it up, they're kind of reporting between 150 to 200 people were dead. That is not the case at all. Thousands of people are missing. It's not just Asheville, North Carolina. There's tons of small mountain communities within the mountains. You lose one road, you're stuck there. They're projecting at least months before they ever get electricity back, those that will be able to, those that still have homes. Thousands and thousands of people are missing, and it's going to also take months to be able to recover all of the bodies, and a lot won't be recoverable. Locals are reporting that there is a consistent smell in the air, and certain officials have confirmed that that is the smell of bodies decaying. There are bodies in the trees. There are bodies under sediment. They're reporting 200 people dead. But there are thousands of people missing. At least 1,000 that we know of that have been reported. I'll link the Google sheet. And you Google and you can't find any of this information. It's not on any of the news how bad this really is. You can't find any resources to help these people. So I have to be a TikTok sleuth. Thank God for TikTok. It's our only way to get real, reliable information, first-hand accounts. It's such a powerful tool, which is obviously why they're trying to take it away. Anyways, I'm going to play a video for us, and then I'm going to move off of this topic. Please, please, please check out the newsletter. If anything, just know these people's stories. With everything going on in Palestine, I think, I donate, I boycott, but ultimately the biggest thing we can do is know these people's stories and share their stories so that it doesn't happen again. I know these are very different things. This is a man-made conflict versus a natural disaster, but these are the things that are going to take us out. The natural disaster is the only thing that we can band together as humans to try to survive together. I don't know if any of that made sense.
Whatever you think you know about Western North Carolina and what's going on over there, you're wrong, unless you're there. I've debated on if I even wanted to make this video because I don't really want to start a bunch of conspiracy theories or anything like that, but I do feel like word needs to get out about what is actually happening that news is not covering. So here's the facts. I have been assisting with running missions and dispatch for an operations team there for the last week. And last week I was assisting running those missions in Ashe County. I've been in Swannanoa this week, and we've been running 70 missions a day, getting help to these people that are not being helped right now. So when I tell you this is firsthand knowledge, this is firsthand knowledge. The death toll of 200 or 200-ish is what's being reported right now. That's not accurate. My organization sent out 10,000 body bags to local authorities this week, and they're requesting more. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all 10,000 of those has been used, but it does mean that they're finding a need, and that they're thinking that they're going to need more. I will tell you, we've spoken to some of the funeral homes and refrigeration truck companies that have been brought in, and there's, 1,000 in this town, 800 in this town, 500 in this town, and we're finding more bodies every day. This is an ongoing process. My team has cadaver dogs that have been going out. We have med teams that are going out. It's not only deaths from the storm, but deaths since the storm. There's a huge need, particularly in our Hispanic communities. A lot of them are scared. There's Border Patrol trucks driving around, and they're scared to ask for help. We've lost 2 Hispanic children to hypothermia in our community this week because they didn't know that help was out there for them, and they don't know who to trust. So the devastation in this area is beyond what anything that I've ever seen before. It's beyond what anybody that has lived it has seen before. We're we're talking to survivors that rode their house a mile down the river. We're talking to people that sat there and told us about 40-foot walls of water looking like tsunamis coming through these towns that have never seen anything like this, and they've lived there their entire lives. Elderly people are sitting here telling me that they rode their house down the river. Again, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories or anything crazy, but as someone who has been there and been out there since basically the beginning, when this first started, I've spent 2 weeks in various locations, and it's bad.
But yeah, on her website, she has some resources. I linked the local food bank, really trying to keep things local. Definitely, if your money goes to Red Cross or FEMA, it's going to make an impact. But right now, I'm really just focused on getting immediate aid to those that really need it and not going through a bunch of hoopla. So the main topic today is not any lighter than what I just talked about, but actually I outlined this episode almost a year ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. I don't know. But last year I outlined this, and I had just been watching. So the title of today's episode, Quiet on Set, Quiet in School and in Churches, the Exploitation of Children. At one point the title was also, Why do we continue to fail children? And I think that's the big question that I have, is why do we continue to do this? That question kind of came about because I was just being I felt like I was just continuously consuming media, like books and podcasts and videos on essays on YouTube, or documentaries, documentary after documentary after documentary, really about the exploitation of children in all different ways. One book that I started reading was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. It's right there on by my TV. It's all about a girl. Her name is Vanessa, and when she was younger, she had an inappropriate relationship with her teacher while she was at boarding school. Yeah, all about how he groomed her, and they had a sexual relationship, and then she got kicked out of school, and it takes place flipping back and forth between time periods of what was going on then and her dealing with it 10 years later in adulthood. So it's just really interesting looking at both perspectives. I started reading it at a time where I personally was going through things where I was now, 25, 26, looking at myself at 15 and 16 and reflecting on how different my mindset was. And, you think you know everything, and you do, but there really is something to an age of consent, and it's really because you need to be informed in order to give consent, and sometimes your brain doesn't have the capacity to conceptualize and understand all of the risks, all of the implications of certain decisions. And so it's interesting watching her younger self be very into the relationship, and her older self kind of still very wrapped up in it, still very traumatized and trying to come out of that. It also really resonated with me because there have been some allegations towards some teachers from my high school with, and people that I went to school with having inappropriate relationships with teachers. And I just think back at how I was when I was that age, and I related to Vanessa. If a teacher had given me that kind of attention, I would have been totally game at the time. It's because I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. And I now know that if that man was 22, 25, 30, he knew what I didn't know and knew about a power dynamic. And you just don't realize that when you're young. You just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so it was a hard book for me to read because it hit a spot for me it hit a very sensitive spot for me, and I think called me out in a lot of ways and made me really reflective and also grateful that I was never in the position to be in some sort of inappropriate relationship with an older man, because I would have said yes. And in my head, I would have thought I was consenting and knew what I was consenting to. And, who knows what that would have damage that would have done to me, on top of other things. So I was reading that book. Also, the movie, which this is, titled after, sorry, not movie, the documentary this is titled after, Quiet on Set, came out, all about the Nickelodeon child stars and a lot of the trauma and abuse that went on those sets and what happened to those kids, and also how they were just neglected. There's also been lots of documentaries that came out in the last year, maybe 2 years, about behavior schools and behavior therapy schools. Paris Hilton came out with her documentary talking about the school she went to in Utah and how that was just such an abusive situation. I have a personal connection with someone that got kidnapped and taken to one of those things to have a little bit of insight into a first person account. And also that all ties in really deeply with Mormonism, and I watch a lot of Mormon expose video essays. Also on the Mormon side, I feel like person after person has been getting exposed for abusing or neglecting their children for the sake of Mormonism or their extremist beliefs. Let's see, there were documentaries that came out about abuse in church. There's always documentaries about that, okay? The religious and religious institutions are a breeding ground for things like child abuse and child sexual abuse. Trigger warning again. Hope you got the trigger warning. It's also in the description. Also, the Boy Scouts documentary came out about all of the crazy things that were going on in Boy Scout, which I knew about some of that because I knew about the lawsuit they were going through because we had a Girl Scouts troop at the school that I worked at, and I was the office manager, and so I was always getting these letters, and it was all this stuff about, their lawsuit and blah, 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 because they had to file bankruptcy. Anyways, now it's oh wow, that's what that was all about, or it's just kind of crazy. And I work with children. I used to work in a school and worked in a school with a lot of children that had some difficult behaviors. I also am now a dance teacher working with mostly little kids, toddlers, but also some teenage preteen girls, and I love kids. I adore them. I adore their naivety and their openness and their creativity and how they express themselves. And I think something that people miss a lot are that kids are people. They live their own little lives. In their life, they get to, we're going to go see Miss Allie for 45 minutes a week, just like you go see your yoga instructor for 45 minutes a week. They have these lives and people that are important to them, and they have ideas and they want to make decisions and they want to have some sort of autonomy over their lives. And it's very hard because their brains are not completely developed, their motor skills are not completely developed. So they do have to rely on adults in order for the best decisions to be made, in order to survive. But unfortunately, there are so many adults that take advantage of this. And I think what I have really come down to in answering my question, why do we continue to exploit and fail children? It's because they have no autonomy, and there's not a lot of conversation about giving children autonomy. A lot of conversation of the exact opposite of, discipline and listen and shut your mouth and don't even be there. I can't say there's not conversation. There's definitely conversation, but I don't think that there is a real conversation, soft parenting and gentle parenting, and there's lots of, we obviously want to work with kids and their social emotional needs. Yes, those are all important conversations to have. But I think that there's not a real conversation happening about actually listening to kids. I think a lot of times you assume you can't have a conversation with a kid, or you brush them off, or you pretend to listen. But kids notice that. All they want is for you to just talk to them and talk to them like they're actual people. Kids are still people. They're not like fun little objects or things we drag around or nuisances or these like other unintelligent lesser species. Kids are people with feelings and emotions and opinions. And if you ask them about it, they will tell you. And that's okay. Kids are allowed to have opinions. Kids are allowed to have ideas. And if we listen to them more, if we allowed them room to talk and to express those ideas, opinions, and feelings, we might hear things that we need to hear. Like so and so said that he wanted to touch my no. But I feel like there's not a real conversation about respecting children. And I think children are people and they have real feelings, thoughts, and opinions, and they are very smart. And we need to respect them as people and not just objects or tag-alongs that come with us. They're not just props, for you to use and move around as you please. I have some stats for you guys. Again, trigger warning, but here are some stats. You can find the statistics and references in the newsletter linked below. 1 out of every 4 girls is sexually abused. 1 out of every 6 boys is sexually abused. 1 in 5 children are solicited sexually while on the internet. Nearly 70% of all sexual assaults, including assaults on adults, occur to children ages 17 and under. The median age for reported child abuse is 9 years old. 85% of child abuse victims never report their abuse. More than 90% of abusers are people children know, love, and trust. 30 to 40% of victims are abused by a family member. 50% are abused by someone outside of the family whom they know and trust. The Illinois Attorney General released a report finding that almost 2,000 children suffered sexual abuse by 451 Catholic clergy members between 1950 and 2019, and that was released in May 2023. I know that those are tough statistics to hear, but I felt that they needed to be shared because they're reality, and we need the facts in order to confront things head on and to fix things. If we live in la la land or it's some sort of abstract concept that we keep separated from us, how can we ever address it and fix it? These statistics also point out something that's really important and that I think there needs to be more education on, is that most likely if you're sexually assaulted as a child or abused in some way, it's going to be by an adult that you know and trust, very likely to be a family member. 30 to 40 victims are abused by a family member. And there's a lot of fear mongering around sex trafficking or, evil people coming in and abusing your children. Even, certain political groups say that immigrants are coming in to abuse and sexually assault your children, or the black man down the street is the one that's going to do that. You're going to profile him that way. Everybody wants to use this fear to point outwards and outside of the church, outside of this home, but usually it's in the home. And that's almost something I wanted to include in the title. Quiet in school, quiet in church, quiet at home. Be quiet about the things that happen in the dark. We're not allowed to talk about those things because they could ruin people's reputations. Well, sometimes people's reputations need to be fucking ruined. So worried about what people will say, what people will think, and then abusers get away with it. What did they say? 85% of child abuse victims never report their abuse. And that's not their fault. Because a lot of times there's a lot of coercion that goes on. There's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of guilt tripping that happens from the adult doing that to the child and making the child feel like it's their fault, threatening the child, and then you have a lot of internalized shame. So it's hard to talk about those things. But if we as a society were more open to listening and respecting children and what they have to say and their feelings and emotions, and if we listened to them and we listened to their intuition, we might be able to protect them better. They might feel more comfortable speaking up. But we have this power dynamic where it's quiet. out of sight, out of mind. You're a child. You don't know. As someone who works with children, I think the cases of these kinds of abuse situations happening in schools, especially when it is a trusted adult, like a staff member of a school who then abuses a child, is one of the most sickening and disgusting things I can ever imagine. Because I could never imagine taking advantage of any of the children that come around me. I do everything in my power to give them as much autonomy as they can. I'm a dance teacher. I have to touch you to show you how it's supposed to be so you can feel it. But it's very easy to say, "Can I touch you?" Or at least saying, "Here, I'm going to touch you." That's not that hard, right? They're not just props to play with. They're still people. I was trained on how to do holds for students that were exhibiting very dangerous behaviors and were going to hurt themselves or could hurt other people. I was trained to do those certain holds. I never had to participate. I actually did participate in one, but I was on the tail end, so I didn't have to do the initial things. And in some of these documentaries about these therapy school programs where the kids go there, they get kidnapped in the middle of the night, they go there, they're on complete lockdown. It's basically like prison. This one kid said prison was better. I mean, it's awful and disgusting. They treat them horribly in these places, and most of these are not certified professionals, health professionals in any capacity, right? Overseeing these children. There's the security footage of them putting a kid in a hold and then slamming him on the ground and then laughing. Putting a kid in a hold because they're in distress is not funny. It's awful. Nobody wants to have to restrain a child. That is emotionally and physically taxing. It's traumatic for the child and it's traumatic for the person that has to do it. And so I don't know. I could never put myself in that mindset where it's funny and you do it as a tactic to assert your power. I mean, it's disgusting to me. And this is what I mean, where these things hit home for me. They hit home for me because I think about my kids and somebody doing that. I mean, that's evil. That's evil. And I think we as a society need to come to terms more with more people than you know, more people than you think are bad people who have bad thoughts and do bad things. We can't trust everyone. It's unfortunate. We are meant to live in communities and children are meant to be raised by a village. It takes a village. I'll tell you, that's why I'm alive and okay today, is because it takes a village, okay? But we have gotten to a point where there is no village. The whole world is almost your village because of the internet. Everybody can have their piece of the pie in raising your child. You don't know the school teachers. You don't know your next door neighbors. You don't know the daycare person. You don't know the priest in your church. We don't know these people. You don't know your daughter's best friend's mom. You don't really know that person. And we have to be very careful and very selective, unfortunately, about who we trust with our children. We need to hold these people accountable for what they're doing. If you're an adult and you know about something like this happening, you have to report it. You have to. And I say this because I know people that haven't, okay? We have to take some responsibility as adults because they can't do it. The children can't do it. The children can do so much. It's not on them. It's on us to stop these people from being passed around from church to church to church, school district to school district to school district, acting set, TV set to TV set to TV set. These people just get passed around because the people in power don't want to cause any problems. They don't want to attract any attention. And it just continues the cycle of harm. I've got a little quote for you about sexual misconduct in school. According to the most recent and accurate prevalence data available, approximately 1 in 10 students will experience sexual abuse or misconduct by a school employee, ranging from sexual jokes to sexual intercourse by the time they graduate high school. 1 in 10. And I think that quote's also important because we're not just talking about intercourse. We're talking about inappropriate touching, inappropriate language, inappropriate innuendos, and those things lead to the much more larger offenses, right? Perpetrators start small. Nobody just starts dating a 16-year-old off rip, okay? I'm like, let's just be for real. So they're going to start small. They're going to start and see what they can get away with. And if they get to that point, that means that they've gotten away with all these other smaller things that we all laugh off, we ignore, we say, oh, that's just their personality, or the kid wanted it, the kid invited it. Why'd she dress that way? Well, she's a kid. Another quote from this article that I read: finally, the use of technology for personal communication is a relatively new factor in school employee sexual misconduct, making it easier for offenders to access students outside of school and more privately. And this is also a very big concern. I know of several cases personally where a lot of things happened over text, inappropriate images being sent, but also this gives perpetrators a lot easier access to groom their victims. And that's also a big part of how these specifically sexual abuse cases happen. Oftentimes, victims are groomed before anything is escalated. And if we can intervene during grooming, if we can catch the signs and change it then we can ultimately, hopefully. I just noticed Celine was sleeping right here. Sorry, I just saw her in the video and I was like, oh, she's my little noodle. But if we can catch it early, then we can help prevent further harm. So let's talk about grooming a little bit. And I think this is important because I think the more we're educated on this, the more we can spot it and call attention to it and stop it in real time. And especially if you're ever going to be a parent, noticing the signs of when someone is acting inappropriate with your child or maybe gearing up to do that is really important so that you can intervene. So grooming. The term usually refers to the situation whereby a potential offender will set up opportunities to abuse by gaining the trust of the child in order to prepare them for abuse. Trust. All define trust as a behavior or attitude which permits risk-taking behavior. The level of faith placed in sex offenders by parents and carers allows them to take risks with their children's well-being, which in turn provides the offender with opportunities to undermine this trust. And that is so, so important because they're not just grooming the child, they're also grooming the adult that's responsible for the child if they're not the one that is in charge of the child. So we're saying, this is a babysitter or a teacher that a kid gets really close with, that checks in a lot, a coach, the youth group leader. These people they're usually people that are put in positions that just kind of automatically gain trust. And if they come off charismatic or whatever, like I said, they're working their way in also with the adult, because the more trust they're able to build there, the more they're able, like this quote said, to get away with and have more access to the victim. So this is the process of grooming: choosing a victim. And then what we just talked about, getting access. Are they how am I going to be able to talk to them more? How am I going to be able to see them more? How am I going to make myself more of an influence on their life? So that could be bringing them on their team. Maybe they're already on their team, making them some sort of leader on the team or in the group, or having them coming to study with you after class, coming for special tutoring opportunities, those kinds of things. They're going to create opportunities to get more access to the child. And then they're going to build trust. The next step in the grooming process involves the emotional recruiting of the victim. Deceptive trust development is a child molester's ability to cultivate relationships with potential victims and possibly their families that are intended to benefit the perpetrator's own sexual interests. This step is often regarded as the central role of the grooming process, wherein the offender establishes trust and cooperation with the victim, which we kind of talked about already. And then gradually it increases to physical contact. They push boundaries until they are stopped or for whatever reason. And that's what I talked about again, right? They're looking to poke holes to see what they can get away with. They're going to push boundaries, do something silly there, here and there, to see what causes red flags or not, and to see how far they can go to satisfy their own interests. And that's why it's so important to really have people around you that you trust and to vet those people and to always keep a watchful eye out. That's also why it's really important to make sure that you're respecting your child and providing them a place where they are able to be open with you about things that happen, things that make them feel uncomfortable. And also why you want to hear these things so that they might not pick up on the red flags, but you can pick up on the red flags of what could potentially be grooming and leading to more. Some of the effects of sexual child abuse: alcohol and drug abuse. They tend to develop dependency on substances in order to disassociate from the trauma they experienced as a child. Risky behaviors, especially sexually. So in like having sex, unprotected sex, ending up becoming pregnant, taking risks with your life. That also brings up STIs, when you're having unprotected sex. So risky behavior because they're pushing their own boundaries, right? Trouble with intimate and personal relationships, which makes sense because you put this trust in this person and you developed this trust, and ultimately they victimized you and they hurt you. And how can you build trust with someone again? How can you trust yourself? And I know this from personal experience. How can you trust yourself to know whether you can trust someone again? And re-victimization, which is more specifically women who have a history of sexual abuse, are at least twice as likely to experience adult sexual victimization. So that's kind of a crazy statistic. Basically, if you were sexually assaulted as a child and you're a woman, you're twice as likely to be sexually assaulted or victimized again as an adult. That's crazy. And I think that goes along with the risk behaviors, alcohol and drug dependency. You're putting yourself in these situations with bad people because that's what you know. And ultimately, an effect of childhood abuse is that they become abusers themselves. And that is the real cycle of abuse, is that oftentimes victims become abusers, become the perpetrators. And in an effort to, try and exert their own power over someone else, oftentimes it's because that's normal to them and they don't know how else to operate. And it's really sad, and is why things like this need to be reported, and is why people that have dealt with these situations really need therapy and counseling and a lot of intervention in order to hopefully recover in some way. If anything that I have talked about today is something that you can relate to, has happened to you, and not just sexual abuse, any kind of abuse, I am so sorry that happened to you, and it shouldn't have happened to you. And I really hope you check out the resources below for those in need that maybe need some intervention or some counseling or a hotline, because there are people here to help you. We are a community. You can reach out to me and I can help you get in touch or more resources with someone, because that is a heavy, 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 heavy burden to hold. Even if it wasn't directly you or someone, that is a heavy, heavy burden to hold. And I encourage you to, if you're comfortable and if you can, speak up about your abuser. And a lot of the stats and a lot of what I talked about was sexual abuse, but it's not just that. There's, especially with the child stars, financial abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglecting children. There are a lot of horrible people in the world that probably had horrible things done to them and continue the cycle and do horrible things to children. And it's really disheartening, but all we can do is educate ourselves and be vigilant and be there and do better. I think it's also important to dismantle myths and lies and misinformation about who likely perpetrators are. They're likely someone It's more likely that than, someone just random off the street. I think acknowledging that is really important. Something else, some podcasts that I listened to were about Munchausen by proxy, which is where oftentimes parents, but most cases are mothers, who, in an effort for attention and to be, thought of as a caring, loving mother, will create an illness for their child and oftentimes induce the illness, cause it. take them to doctor visit, and in some cases children die because their parent might have been poisoning them to make them appear sick, or they got a surgery that they didn't need to have because their parent insisted on it or was able to coerce a doctor into doing it. And that's a whole other thing. And that might be a whole other podcast episode, because that's a whole other reframing of people that we all need to work on. And that is mothers. We often see, because so many mothers are amazing, but just because you're a mother does not mean you're infallible. It doesn't mean you're not capable of hurting your child. So, and that's oftentimes how they get away with these things, because people, assume that they're just a caring, loving mother. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that this was kind of a heavy one, but it is something that was important to me. And I really just hope that it can be a resource and maybe a starting point for a larger conversation that you have with people in your life, a conversation that you have with yourself, or just a way to a starting point to educate yourself more on child exploitation. I mean, because we didn't even talk about like kids like being forced to work, forced labor. Like, we didn't get into any of that kind of stuff. But it's really important for us to recognize these patterns when people of any kind use their power to abuse someone in a position of less power. And that goes for adults and children, that goes for government and people, that goes for the workplace, that goes for class, that goes for so many things. And it's just one more place that we need to look at and say, what can we do to make this better? And a lot of that is implementing better systems, but a lot of that starts with just education and knowing what we're looking at. Like I said, there's a lot of just like misinformation, and a lot of the times people don't know really what they're looking at or what to look for in order to avoid these situations. Okay, Celine has said that it is time to be done. Is that what you're saying? You need pets? It's time for me to pay attention to you. Well, thanks for checking in with me, hanging out with me, listening to babblings. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you didn't cry. I almost cried a lot. This was a pretty heavy episode. Didn't realize that when I was planning it out. Yikes, Sally. Next week we'll try to be a little lighter, or in 2 weeks we'll try to be a little lighter. I think I am going to talk about fashion and sustainable fashion in the fashion industry. Because hey, you guys, what's going on with the Victoria's Secret show? Why is everybody like losing their minds over that? I thought we finally got rid of that. Why is it back? You tell me in the comments. Okay. All right. You want to say anything, Celine? Oh my God, she looks so mad at me. You want to say anything? She said, please get the microphone out of my face. All right. Okay. Well, have a great day wherever you are. God bless.